Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So, this is part three of my Jodie Arias marathon, and this is the a continuation of the first day of the cross examination. And before we get into that, I am going to play just a few clips from an interview with Juan Martinez. I'll just hold fire while I wait for people to roll in. And if anyone is in here, yeah, I've had a few technical issues with my technology. So if you can let me know if you can hear this okay, if you just throw a one in the chat, that'll be helpful.
The reason that I wrote the book is that initially
So he's just talking about the book that he wrote here a few years afterwards called Conviction about the trial.
the story was interesting. Everyone had already seen what had happened in court, but as with everything else, there's another part to the story, and that part was what I had brought to the courtroom. There were many decisions that I undertook, and I thought that it would be interesting to people who had actually watched the trial to find out what it was that I was thinking when I did these things. For example, why is it that I included some things in opening statement and not other things? For example, the gas cans, I kept them out of the opening statement, even though they were obviously very beneficial in proving the case.
Perfect, thanks, Susie. Okay, so I'm just going to play a few little clips from this interview, clips that are kind of pertinent to what we've gone through so far. Um, let's go to this part here where he talks about his initial theory when he was on the crime scene.
My on call shift had already been completed at 8 o'clock in the morning when I received a call later that morning at 8:30. And it was a sergeant from the Mesa Police Department telling me that they had found the body of this individual. And the only thing he really knew was that the individual's name was Travis Alexander. Rather than shirk this call onto the next individual, I decided to take the call. And I went out to East Mesa. When I was allowed inside after the scene had been secured, one of the things that caught my attention and that I guess the word is impressed was that it was very clean and meticulous downstairs. But I did get upstairs, and when I did get upstairs, I was able to see that in the bathroom there had been a horrific event that had taken place. At that point, I really didn't know exactly what had happened, but one of the things that I did know was that it was throughout the bathroom. The blood was on the floor, it was streaked on the walls, and Mr. Alexander had been stuffed into the shower. In looking at that, it appeared that whoever had done this was someone who was very angry and very upset, but they were also had thought this thing through because they had actually taken time to clean things up. So even though there was a lot of blood and even though there was plenty of violence, it spoke to a calculated, kind of thought out killing where the individual had been methodical in their approach to ending Travis Alexander's life. I never get calloused to the violence that I see, and it's almost on a day to day basis. And that's why I continue to work at the same place that I have been for the past 27 years. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the camera. It was found by police in the washing machine. It had actually gone through the wash cycle and had been left behind. There was also bleach that had been added to the cycle when it was started. And in that camera, what police were able to find were a number or sets of photographs. There were actually three sets of photographs. The first set showed Arias and Mr. Alexander engaged in sexual activity. Um, and it showed that the activity was on June 4th of 2008. And Arias, of course, claimed that she hadn't even been there on that particular date. So the police then knew that she was not telling the truth as to whether or not she was there on the day that he was murdered. But that was early in the afternoon. That was around 1:30 in the afternoon. The police were also able to find another set of photographs showing Travis Alexander in the shower. That was closer to the murder. That was around 5:30 in the afternoon, but not exactly at the time of the murder. The third set of photographs the police were able to uncover were three accidental or inadvertent photographs. Um, Arias had been holding the camera, and at some point during the attack, the camera had dropped. And when it dropped and it hit the button so that a photograph was accidentally snapped, and it showed Arias' foot, and it showed Mr. Alexander's head as the blood streamed down his right shoulder, and it appeared that Arias was attempting to move him down the hallway. There's another inadvertent photograph that was also taken, and that is Arias walking him, not walking him, but Arias pulling the body down the hallway. So that is really the piece of evidence that, uh, if one wants to call it a mistake, that Arias made. Made a mistake in leaving that behind. The camera that actually took these photographs belonged to Mr. Alexander. It was a new camera, and Arias was tutoring him on how to use it, and in and that's the reason why they were using it, according to her, to take photographs at different stages. And it was this camera that belonged to him that actually was one of the keys in pointing the finger at her. From the very beginning of the case, it appeared that the main suspect was Jodie Arias. In speaking to the friends that were at the scene, her name kept coming up as someone who was a stalker, someone who was clingy. And so initially, although we didn't have any suspects, but her name kept coming up. She even called the police that June 10th and wanted to know what was going on in the investigation. She claimed that she was just an ex girlfriend who was worried about him and really just wanted to know what happened. So initially, we didn't have any suspects. We just had an ex girlfriend who was um, clingy, as I said, and was a stalker. Thereafter, it took some time for us to develop the photographs. It also took us some time to get the results back from the DNA analysis as well as the fingerprint analysis. The fingerprint analysis came back first, and there was a left palm print on the wall um, that was identified to Arias. Additionally, there was some biological matter, blood, that was tested for DNA, and it was found that that also matched her. So we knew, or at least the police knew at that point, that she had been there. Of course, you can't date DNA and you can't date the fingerprints. So we needed to find something that indicated when she had been there. And the photographs provided that because they showed she was there on June 4th of 2008. And once I had that, then it was my decision to go ahead and charge her with the premeditated murder. Him in self.
Oh, hey Sarah, so glad you caught alive. I'd be so interested to hear your thoughts about the camera being left behind. Um, she, it seems that she thought it would just be completely wiped and destroyed by putting it in the washing machine, right, with the bleach and all that. Why did she take the chance though, right? Um, Another thing I wanted to point out that some of you might not be aware of is the fact that she was trying to send out coded messages to people outside of the jail through coded messages in magazines, and she got caught. Obviously, she was going for this defense of, being an abused girlfriend, and some of the witnesses on the outside were contradicting her alibi, I guess. So I was wanting to play this little clip here of one talking about it.
In anticipation of a hearing that we had to determine whether or not letters that had been provided to me by defense counsel indicating or supporting her self-defense claim, I was at the jail and I was sitting there with a officer. And as I sat there, I noticed that one of the people that visited her often was coming in. Arias immediately asked the guard to transfer or give her 2 magazines. And looking through the magazines, the jailers were able to see that in some of the creases, there were some messages. And those messages were directed to somebody on the outside, indicating that they had, there's an expletive, indicating that they had messed up and that they needed to come and see her immediately so they could get this thing straightened out because he or she contradicted whatever story Arias had been telling for the past year. My on-call.
All right, so that's really as much as I want to play there from that interview now. I'll play a few more clips later on once they start getting into the more evidence regarding the gas cans and things. So I'm going to play the next part of the cross-examination. This is the third part from the first day of the cross-examination.
Nowhere in your journal do you ever mention anything about Mr. Alexander in this incident that you claim involving masturbatory conduct, correct?
That's correct.
Take a look at Exhibit 463. This is a listing of phone calls between you and Mr. Alexander, from Mr. Alexander's telephone.
Okay.
I understand that those are not your phone records, right?
That's right.
And so I don't expect you to value.
Guys, can you let me know in chat if you seen a notification go out, because I'm having a lot of issues with notifications not seeming to go out. So annoying.
For the authentication aspect of it, but we did previously discuss the calls that were involved between you and Mr. Alexander, and you indicated, well, that seems right. The calls that we previously discussed, they're on that sheet, correct?
Not all of the calls, but yes, some are.
All the calls that are there, ma'am, are the ones between you and him, correct?
The ones highlighted are between him and I, yes.
Right. There are other calls, but not between you and him, right?
Yes.
And the calls between you and him are the ones that you and I talked about, and then you indicated that they seemed right, correct?
They seem correct, that's right.
And that sheet bears that out, correct?
Yeah, the times are out of order, but I think
The times are out of order, and they're out of order because they're different switches that carry the calls, right?
I don't know.
But they are out of order, right?
The times are out of order, yes.
Right, but in terms of the calls themselves, you know, we talked about you calling him at 3:53 p.m. You can find that on there, correct?
Yes.
There's a blue marking for those, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, you've just confirmed what I suspected. Yeah, the notifications are not going out. I think I've been cancelled by YouTube. But I should say, the book there at the beginning that Juan Martinez was talking about is called Conviction, and it's about this trial. Now, I've got the audiobook and the ebook, and if anyone would like to have them, just send me an email. I'll put it in chat here, and I'll send it on to you. And I have purchased these, so it is legal, don't worry. And I'll be happy to send that on.
So there's that call, right?
Yes.
And there is no other call on the 21st previous to 3:53 p.m. that you can see, right?
You mean from me to him?
Right. Or from him to you, or from you to him.
From me to him, I don't see any other.
Good theory, Sarah. You think it was an accident that she tossed it into the laundry and she was hurrying to clean up, and it got wrapped up and thrown in. Yeah, it would have to be, if that's true, yeah, it would, because you just imagine Jodie as a type of person, right, that she was so meticulous in planning out this event that if that's true, she must have been going crazy trying to find the camera, and she just didn't realize that it was in there. Then she just had no time left, and she had to leave.
Before 3:53.
Right. And the
Because that was really the evidence that absolutely nailed her, right? The camera.
last call that was made by Mr. Alexander on that telephone, and we talked about these calls, was at 7:11 p.m., right? There are no calls from his phone after that.
I don't see the one at 7-Eleven.
The last call period that he made.
Yeah, and she only made a half-assed attempt to clean up, right? She was pouring water around, but she left a lot of evidence and blood, you know, her palm prints and things.
Not just to you, but to anybody. Maybe
Oh,
that was
on the
confusing.
21st?
Right, to anybody.
Okay.
That is the last call that he made, right? There may have been others that called him, but that's the last call that he made.
Oh, I didn't look at who was calling who.
I know, Helen, right? Her glasses are nothing more than a gimmick, a costume.
It looks like this is the last call from a cell phone on the 22nd, or 21st, my apologies.
Ma'am, this issue involving your allegation that, I may have it back. Your allegation that Mr. Alexander was engaging in masturbation while viewing images of boys and girls, that was subject of a hearing back in August 8th of 2000.
Yeah, Sarah, she was condemned by her own passion, her photography passion.
2011, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Well, then let me show you a
Partly.
document to make sure that we're clear, and if I could have it certified. Now, take a look at Exhibit 464 and see if that refreshes your recollection as to the date of the hearing, which is on the upper right-hand corner, and then take a look at page 3 to see if that refreshes your recollection that there was a hearing.
Yes, there's some language I don't understand, but I remember this.
Right, that, I'm just asking about the date. It was August 8th, correct?
Yes.
And during that, the purpose of that hearing involved at least an aspect of the allegation that Mr. Alexander had engaged in pedophilic conduct, right? Overruled. You may answer, right?
An aspect, yes.
And 4 days, on August 4th, before that, you tried to get somebody to lie at that hearing, didn't you?
No.
All right, let me show you some documents. I want you to take a look at Exhibit 465.
Judge, we're going to
Yes, you may approach.
Take a look at Exhibit 465. Let's see if you recognize it.
I do recognize it.
Look, it's a magazine, isn't it?
Yes.
It's your magazine, correct?
Yes.
Sent to you, correct?
Yes.
In the mail, and you had it in your possession at one point, right?
Yes.
And you had it in your possession on August 4th, correct?
I think I did.
Pardon?
I think I did, yes.
I go for the admission of Exhibit number 465.
465 is admitted.
Now, previously, you talked to us yesterday on direct examination about being in jail and doing an interview with Inside Edition, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you were in jail when you received this magazine, correct?
Yes.
It's addressed to you, correct?
Yes.
And with regard to this magazine, on August 4th, isn't it true that an individual by the name of Ann Campbell came to visit you?
Yes.
And she came by and she started to visit. The visitation began at 1:36, but for you roughly around 1:30 in the afternoon, right?
Yeah, it was in the afternoon.
And that conversation between you and Ann Campbell lasted approximately an hour, correct?
It lasted a long time, from what I remember.
And as part of the process, while you were there, one of the things that, or as part of the visitation, one of the things that you wanted to do was to give 2 magazines to Ms. Campbell, correct?
Yes,
And the way it works is that before you give that magazine, it has to go through a guard so that they can give it out to the person, right?
it has to go through a sergeant.
And in this case, that's what happened with this magazine, correct?
Yeah, it goes through, I'm sorry, it goes through an officer, then a sergeant, then another officer.
But you, and bottom line though, is you wanted to give this magazine to Ann Campbell, right?
That one and another one.
Right, the Star magazine, correct?
Yes, it was Star.
Well, let's look at the
So he's going into the fact that she was trying to get messages out to people on the outside through these magazines with coded messages.
other magazines. Take a look at exhibit number 466. Is this the magazine that you wanted to give to Ann Campbell, 466?
It looks like it.
Well, it's got your name as the addressee, right?
Yes,
And it is a Star magazine, correct?
yes, that's the one.
And this is the one that went along with the photography magazine, correct?
Yes.
I move the admission of exhibit 466.
Objection.
466 is admitted.
Exhibit 465 is called Digital Photo Pro in a magazine, correct?
Yes,
And you previously indicated to us that you're very interested in photography and that sort of thing, right?
yes, I was.
And that for many years prior to your arrest that you were involved in that sort of thing, right?
Yes,
You took photographs at weddings and all that, and other kinds of photographs, right?
yes,
And here is the tag that's on there. It does have your name on there, right?
yes.
Now, inside this magazine, on page 6, we just look at it, leave the printed numbers to the side and the red numbers to the side. There is some writing in pencil. Can you see it?
Yes.
And can you tell us, if you can, what that says?
Mark Stanek, 520-256-1178, ABC in parentheses.
And you know who Mark Stanek is, right?
Yes,
Mark Stanek is a producer for, or at that time was a producer for ABC News, right?
yes. Well, I don't know if he was the producer at that time.
But he had visited you on occasion, right?
Yes, about 4 years ago.
Right about the same time that this was going on. Wow. Let me just show you exhibit number 467. Does that refresh your recollection as to when this individual from ABC was visiting you?
Yes.
And what dates did he visit you?
July 8th, 2009 and September 17th, 2009.
Okay. And that's the same individual that's mentioned there, right?
Yes,
You previously indicated to us that with regard to Inside Edition, that they came to visit you and that you really didn't solicit them coming out to the jail to talk to you, right?
that's right.
And that you believe that the guard pushed you into that interview, right?
Inside Edition, yes.
And who was that guard? What's that guard's name?
I don't remember her name. It was 5 years ago almost. She didn't push me. She just encouraged me.
Well, what's the name of this person that encouraged you?
I don't remember her name. They don't wear name tags very often.
But with regard to the visit involving Mark Stanek with ABC News, she had nothing to do with that, right?
No, nothing to do with that one.
And you took his visit, right?
Yes, I did.
You can refuse a visit from anybody you want, correct?
Yes,
And you did not refuse his visit, right?
that's right.
Now, let's take a look at another page, page 20. And there are some words there on page 20. And they're kind of hard to find, but they're in pencil, right? The writings?
I haven't seen them.
Those are in pencil, right?
It looks like it, yes.
Pardon?
It looks like it, yes.
Well, no, take a look at it. We want to make sure.
Yes, it is.
And where you are living currently, they do not allow pens, right?
That's right,
They only allow pencils, right?
yes.
And on this page number 20, it says, read it for me.
You testify so.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Happy thoughts. She's still eligible for the death penalty at this point, right? That's what Juan Martinez was going for, was the death penalty, and the fact that she's so confident. It's You're right. She really did think she was going to pull this off.
Page 37. And you would agree that the one on page 20 is kind of hard to find. It's kind of right here near the spine of the book, right?
It seems like it, yeah.
Page 37. Has some more writing on it. See that right there? And again, if the glare is too much, let me know and I'll work at
It looks like it said, oh, you want me to read it? I'm
it.
sorry.
Yes, please.
It looks like it says, we can fix this.
We can fix this, right?
Right.
Look at Kurt and Army in the background there, wishing he was anywhere else apart from here.
Page 40. Has some more writing on it, and the lighting's not so good, but it says, what does it say?
Looks like it says directly contradicts what I've been saying for over a year.
Okay. And the publishing date on this item is August 2011, correct?
That's correct.
Says what?
It says, you fucked up what you told my attorney the next day.
Okay. Then page 54.
Yeah, he pleaded to get off the case. Happy thoughts. Pleaded.
Says what?
Interview was excellent, must talk ASAP.
And 56 says what?
Get down here ASAP and see me before you talk to them again and before.
Doesn't seem to make much sense, but let me mark an exhibit for you. Take a look at exhibit 468. This contains the pages and what was written on them, doesn't it? And if you need the book, let me know.
Yes.
I move for the admission of exhibit 468.
Approved. 468 is admitted.
In summary, this is what we've just covered, correct, in the magazine.
That's correct.
Let's take a look at the star name, which is Exhibit 466. How is it that you were able to find this Bianca if you had never had contact with her?
I asked a mutual friend, and he told me what room she was in. So I
Which
went and knocked
mutual
on-
friend did? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I just went and knocked on that door.
Which mutual friend did you ask?
I believe his name was Steve.
And is this the individual that you said that acted really gay, right?
He was gay, and he was acting very frantic.
Right. And you indicated that when you came over there, he started to act really frantic, right?
Yes.
And he started to act really frantic just at the sight of you, right?
I think because I was asking about Bianca, and he knew about the affair.
Well, he saw you and you started to talk to him, right?
Yes.
When you started to talk to him, did you immediately indicate to him that you wanted to talk about Bianca?
Not about, but to.
So you indicated you wanted to talk to Bianca, right?
Yes.
And immediately, or shortly thereafter, he started to get all flustered, right? Would that be correct or not?
Not when I saw him, but when I went to her room to knock.
So you start talking to him about Bianca, and he tells you what place, the room she's staying in, right?
Yes.
And he goes with you, right?
No, he told me the wrong room.
He gave, initially, when you went to see him, he gave you the wrong room, right?
Yes.
And you went to that wrong room.
Yes.
And when you went to that wrong room, did you speak to the people there?
I knocked, nobody answered.
In the meantime,
Did you hear that there was similar accusations made about Casey Anthony? Happy thoughts.
Steve had gone somewhere else, right?
Yes.
He had gone to where Bianca was, right?
Yes.
But you didn't tell Steve why you were there, right?
Just that I wanted to talk to Bianca.
Right, but you didn't tell him why you wanted to talk to her, right?
No, not why.
And it was kind of an unannounced visit, right?
Yes.
And so he took it upon himself, without any prompting from you, to give you the wrong place and then go and talk to Bianca, right?
Yes. Oh.
And then you went, and how is it that you were able to find Bianca's room?
I thought maybe I misheard him and transposed the numbers, so I reversed the two last numbers. It was a three-digit dorm, and I had the right floor, but I just went to the opposite number.
So do you remember the number?
No.
So you went there, and when you got to the door, you heard that there was talking inside, right?
Yes.
And there was talking inside. Would it be characterized as excited inside?
Steve's voice, yes.
Right, and this is the one that you said he was sort of acting gay, over dramatic, right?
Yes, dramatic.
And you attributed that to the fact that he was gay, though, right?
It was a feminine tone, so yes.
Well, no, I mean, part of what you told us before was that, well, he's kind of gay and he's kind of
He
that
is
way,
gay.
and so that he was being dramatic, right?
He is gay and he was acting dramatic.
And that's what you told us, right?
Yes.
It could have also been that it wasn't because he was gay, it was because he was concerned that you were there, that he was excited, right?
Well, I never said that he was.
Overall, you may answer.
I never said he was acting that way because he's gay. I just said the tone of voice, I remember it because it was very feminine and very frantic, almost like a woman.
But you're the one that brought up the fact that he was gay, right?
Yes.
And explaining this to us, right?
Yeah, when I was describing it.
Right. And so you were able to hear his voice through the door, right?
Yes.
And it was an excited tone.
Yes.
And that excited tone could be for a myriad of reasons, but one of them was that you were there unannounced, right?
That's right.
And it could be that he was, for whatever reason, excited, or that term, he was excited that you were there, right?
Yeah, it causes speculation. We don't know why he's excited.
Rephrase the question.
He had his demeanor when you arrived changed after you asked for Bianca, right?
I didn't notice it change. I just noticed it different after I went to knock on her door.
And his demeanor changed to the fact that he was more excited, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Right?
Frantic.
And you began to knock on the door, right?
Yes.
Nobody answered, right?
No, they answered.
Initially, right?
Bianca answered. Oh,
Well,
the
no,
first
not
door?
initially.
Do you mean the first
The
door?
second door. Didn't you say before that you went to that door, you knocked on that door, and nobody answered initially? You heard them talking.
For a second before she came to the door, yeah.
So, so you were there long enough to hear them excitedly talking, right?
Not her, just him.
And how long were you standing there before the door was open?
I'd say 5 seconds or less.
She opened the door, right?
Yes.
And did you recognize her? Well, you did recognize her from her photograph, right?
It looked to
Yeah, Sarah, a game fueled by utter rage and anger. A combination of the fact, I think, that Travis did genuinely treat her like trash, and the fact that she had the capability of um, losing her mind in such a way and acting so impulsively. It's so bizarre how she doesn't seem to take it seriously, but I think she literally just thinks she's intellectually superior. Yeah, she certainly had an ego. She it's one of those things for people that are that narcissistic, right? That they have the advantage of not really having much self-doubt, that they're capable of acting a role quite convincingly to a certain extent. Um, and it took a while in this trial for her to eventually be broken down.
be the same person.
Right. And you began to talk to her, right?
Yeah, I asked if she was Bianca.
Right. You began to talk to her, right?
Yes.
And you started to talk to her, and you brought up the subject of Matt McCartney, right?
Yes.
She didn't bring it up, right?
That's right.
And you started to talk to her, and you started to ask her whether or not they had a relationship, right?
Yes.
And you were able to determine that they did, in fact, have a relationship, right?
Yes.
And you were able to determine that they, in fact, had been intimate, right?
She indicated they had not had sex, but intimate somewhat, yes.
And ma'am, at that time, when this was going on, you weren't living with Mr. McCartney, right?
No, I was
You
in
got-
Ashland.
Pardon?
I was in Ashland.
And he was where?
He lived at, well, he had moved away from Crater Lake. He had lived at Crater Lake that summer, and now he moved back to Phoenix with his dad at that point.
And your belief was that you and he were still boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, right?
That was my belief.
Actually, he may have had a different belief, as you came to know later, right?
Yes.
He did not believe that you and he had a relationship, but were not boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, right?
I don't know if that was his belief.
Well, you've spoken to him about it, right?
Yes.
And based on your conversation, do you have a belief, don't you have a belief that at that time, he didn't think that you and he were boyfriend and girlfriend?
Based on that conversation, my belief was that he knew he had
Pardon?
messed up, and he was very sorry for it.
But how long did this conversation take with Bianca?
We actually sat and chit-chatted for about an hour.
And this was at your,
Yeah, Sarah. The way I look at it is that Jodie had all the she had the chemical makeup already within her, and Travis just happened to light the fuse.
request, right?
Initially, yeah, I initiated the contact.
And for an hour, you received information about what her relationship was with Mr. McCartney, right?
He wasn't the whole conversation, but initially, yes.
Well, you weren't there to visit with her because you'd driven an hour and a half, right?
Can you say that again?
Well, you weren't there just to chit chat with her, right?
That wasn't the point of the drive, no,
I mean, you wanted to find out what the heck was going on with Mr. McCartney, right?
absolutely.
And so it's fair to say that this wasn't a situation where you were just sitting there.
Do you not think as well when it's when someone finds themselves in this situation, someone that's committed such a heinous crime, but they're in front of the cameras, it's a high-profile case. They're in the theatre of the court. I think it kind of helps them to um, detach themselves somewhat from the actual cold reality of what's coming down the line for them. And I think they rather enjoy the spectacle of it all, and they enjoy the fact that they're an actor, right? They're on the stage for some time, and they're the center of attention, and everyone's looking at them, the jury, and it just happens to be the case that a lot of criminals like this happen to be highly narcissistic. So they rather enjoy the spectacle, and they rather enjoy being the center of attention. Just like Ted Bundy, yeah, it's a great example. Ted Bundy lived his life as if he was on a stage. And it's definitely true here for Jodie. And I think that's what kind of helps to detach herself from the cold reality of the fact that she could be actually put to death at the end of this.
Chit-chatting about her job or anything like that. It was because you were interested in finding out what was going on, right?
Yes.
And you were satisfied after speaking to her.
She's enjoying the joust with Juan Martinez. You know, it's like a chess game to her. And it's taken up all her focus right now.
For about an hour, what was going on?
I was satisfied pretty early on, not just the hour.
And in fact, isn't it true that you became a bit excited or upset during that conversation?
No,
At any time did you raise your voice to Bianca?
definitely not. I was in her home.
And in this place, Crater Lake, was what, an hour and a half from where you were living in Ashland, right?
About 70 miles.
But it's an hour and a half driving, right?
I think so, yes, about an hour and a half.
And then after that, where did you go?
After that, it was very late. I didn't want to drive the hour and a half back because I'd fall asleep. So I went and stayed at in a mutual friend's dorm for 2
And what's that friend's name?
Eddie.
Eddie what?
Eddie Lee.
And how did you know Eddie Lee?
I knew him because his parents also owned a restaurant in Wairika, as did my parents at that time. And
How old were you when this was happening?
Yeah, I agree, Sarah. I do believe that both Jodie and Chris Watts share the fact that I don't think under any other circumstances they would ever have done what they did. I think they both their experiences played out in such a unique way that caused them to do what they did. I don't think Chris would have harmed a fly other than if the circumstances hadn't gone exactly the way they did, like a perfectly tragic laid plan. And I think it's the same with Jodie. And that might be controversial for some people to hear, but I think it's true.
how old was I?
Yes.
I believe I just turned 21.
And your parents still own a restaurant, right?
No, not at that time.
They had owned one up to how old were you when they
I think
stopped?
I was 16 when they closed it the first time, 16 or 17.
Right about the time you moved out of their home.
It was I moved out after they closed it.
And growing up, they had more than one restaurant, though, right?
Yes.
And how many restaurants did your family have?
Total that I know of, 6 or 7.
And growing up, there really wasn't any financial problems, was there?
Early on, there was not.
And early on, there were trips to Disneyland, for example, right?
Yes, when I was very young.
And when you say very young, we're talking up to 6, 7, or 8, right?
Under 10.
And during that time, it was what has been described as what you've described as an idyllic sort of environment, right?
Yes.
This is another strange thing with this case. It's kind of the converse cliche background to to the victim and the perpetrator, Jodie actually had a really good upbringing and apparently a really happy upbringing, although she tries to portray something different in this trial. It seems that that's all just lies based on what we know. And it was actually Travis that had a really tough upbringing. You know, both his parents were had major drug issues, and he had to go out there and grab his own life with his own hands and really make himself into something. And that's the kind of opposite of the cliche, right?
Somewhat.
And then at some point, the restaurant issues started, there became an issue with the restaurants, right?
Yes, I believe, my understanding is it was an issue.
And Mr. McCartney, where was he living at the time that you went to see Bianca?
He was living in Phoenix, Oregon with his dad.
And he had a room there, correct?
I believe he had his own room there, yes.
And sometimes when Mr. McCartney, what town did he live in again?
Phoenix, Oregon?
And after this conversation, you and he broke up, right?
Yes, after he got back from Borrego Springs.
Pardon?
After he returned from Borrego Springs, that's where he was that night.
Okay, he came up, and what town did you meet in? Phoenix? Is that where you met?
Yes,
And that's when you decided that was the end of it, right? You decided that, right?
I don't remember. It was just a lot of tears, and it was obvious that the trust was gone and there was not any kind of relationship anymore.
And basically, that's the same reason why you and Mr. Alexander broke up, because according to you, the trust was gone, right?
That's right.
And so after the trust is gone with Mr. McCartney, though, you still continue sort of seeing him, don't you?
There were some blurred boundaries, but we were not boyfriend-girlfriend.
And in fact, you even stayed together at Crater Lake or Ventana Inn together after this, right? After you broke up, right?
We crashed in a tent for 2 weeks, but we were not together after at Ventana.
But you did have intercourse with him after this breakup, didn't you? Do you remember telling us that on direct
Yes,
examination?
one time.
One time, but you did though, right?
Yes.
And did he continue to live at his parents' house?
He moved down to Ventana to find work also. He was looking for seasonal work.
Right, and at Ventana, this is where they have the places to stay as part of the job, right?
Yes, more employee housing.
And where were you when he was at Ventana?
I was hired at Ventana first, and then he applied for a job right after me, and he was hired also.
And you and he were not sharing, were you sharing the same bed or not?
After I got housing, no, we were not.
Right. Isn't it true that after you got housing, though, you would, when he wasn't around, go over to wherever he was staying and stay in his bed?
He didn't have a bed, he lived in a tent, and no, that's not true.
So how long did you continue to see him?
Well, we were no longer romantic. We just hung out more like friends.
But you've continued to be friends up to this day, though, haven't you?
We've sort of lost contact, but yeah, we're still friends.
And, well, you at least had contact with him involving the interview with the prosecutor, though, right?
I believe I did, but I know my attorneys did for sure.
I'm not interested in what your attorneys did. I'm interested in what you did. Isn't it true that you had contact with him, right?
Yes.
And when you made your trip down from...
Juan goes out his way to either try to annoy her or he can't sort of conceal his contempt for her. I don't know which it is. I've not decided yet.
Wairika to kill Mr. Alexander, you stopped in the Monterey area, didn't you?
I can't answer your question the way it's phrased.
You didn't stop in the Monterey, didn't drive through the Monterey area?
I did stop in the Monterey area.
And one of the people that you saw in the area was Matthew McCartney, right?
Yes.
And did he live in Seaside then?
I believe he lived in Pacific Grove.
And that's the
Or
same.
Monterey. I mean, the border is like
I think you're right,
they're
Happy
right
Paws.
next to each other.
And so you actually stopped to see him back on June 3rd of 2008, right?
Yes,
And in fact, you spent the night with him June 2nd to the morning of June 3rd, right?
yes, I crashed on the floor.
But you spent the night with him, right?
Not with him, no.
Okay, you spent the night at his apartment, right?
Him and his roommate, yes.
Okay, he and his roommate had an apartment. You spent the night there, correct?
It was like a house. I stayed the night there in the room that they shared.
In the house, they had a room together, both of them, right?
Yes.
And you stayed in the same room with these two individuals, right?
Yes, on the floor.
All right. And the three of you were in the room, though, is the point of it, right?
Yes, when we slept, yes.
And you guys went to sleep around midnight, and you got up at what time the next morning, which would have made it the 3rd. What time did you get up?
I don't know what time we went to sleep, and I woke up sometime in the morning.
And did he go with you to see Mr. Brewer or not?
No,
And so you, after seeing him though, there, you parted ways, and you left, right? And went to Salinas, right?
yes, I did. Yes, went to Salinas.
Pardon?
I went to Salinas.
And how far is Salinas from Pacific Grove, Seaside, Monterey, whatever the area is? How far is it?
My recollection is that it's between 20 and 30 minutes, depending on the traffic.
And you were sort of detouring to Salinas for some cosmetic work, right?
Well, I had to go to Salinas anyway to get on the road because I have to take Highway 1 south. I mean, 101, excuse me, south.
But you did go, when you went to Salinas, you did get some cosmetic work, right?
Yes, my nails.
Right, and you said it took a long time, right?
Yes.
And what kind of place was that in Salinas?
It was at a strip mall, somewhat,
What was the name of it? How about that?
oh, I don't know. It was one of those little operations where people are just coming and going. There was a long wait.
And they only do nails, according to you then?
It looked like they did pedicures also. I don't remember if there was hair or not, but just definitely nails and feet.
But it could have been a place, a salon, where they also did hair, right?
It might have been.
And do you remember the name of this place at all?
No.
Overruled.
What time did you get to Salinas?
I don't remember.
And how long were you in Salinas?
Few hours. I don't remember. I know that I wanted to get on the road, but
So what time did you get on the road?
it was still light out, but I don't remember the time.
This was after you had been over to Mr. Brewer's house, right?
Yes.
You were there for a time, and then you left Mr. Brewer's house, right?
Yes.
And then you went back to return something, right?
If I remember from his recollection, I kind of remember it.
Well, I'm not asking for his, I'm asking for your recollection. Do you remember coming back and giving him something?
I remember, I don't actually remember it.
Then I don't want you to tell me if you don't remember anything.
Yeah.
Judge?
Yes, all right, ladies and gentlemen, Monday, 10:30. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice weekend. You're excused.
All right, so that's the end of the first day. I may as well go on to the first part of the second day of cross-examination here. As I say, there's a lot to go through, and it
Nowhere in
definitely
your document
heats
did you
up
ever mention
later on.
anything about Mr. Alexander in this incident that you claimed involving masturbatory conduct, correct?
That's correct.
Take a look at Exhibit 463. This is a listing of telephone calls between you and Mr. Alexander, or from Mr. Alexander's telephone.
Okay.
I understand that those are not your own records, right?
That's right.
And so I don't expect you to vouch for the authentication aspect of it, but we did previously discuss the calls that were involved between you and Mr. Alexander. And you indicated that that seems right. The calls that we previously discussed, they're on that sheet, correct?
Not all of the calls, but yes.
The call,
All right, let's bring in the jury.
Okay, so that was the wrong
The
video.
record will show the presence
the
of the
correct one.
jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Did any of you see or hear anything about this case in the media in the past week? I see no hands. Did anyone attempt to discuss this case with you during the past week or at any time? I see no hands. Ms. Arias, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, you may continue with cross-examination.
ma'am, you have a problem with the truth, telling the truth, don't you? Overruled.
Not typically.
Well, when it's to your benefit, you will lie, right?
Objection argumentative.
The stage.
Not typically. I only have issues with my memory when I've killed someone.
Ma'am, do you remember having a conversation with Detective Flores of the Mesa Police Department back on July 15th of 2008?
Yes.
And this was the day that you were arrested, right?
Yes.
And during that time, you told him something, and let's take a look at it right now. This is Exhibit 378.
It's at night and I go to
Oops,
sleep.
hold on, I'm sorry.
Objection, Your Honor.
Always.
We approach.
You may. Gentlemen, you should disregard what you just saw on the screen. You may continue.
Ma'am, this is Exhibit 348.
A lot of details on this case that haven't been released to the public and not even to Travis's family. And those details are known only by us and the person who did it. Okay, and that's
And bear in mind, guys, such was her arrogance that she voluntarily brought herself to the police headquarters, right? She was so confident in herself that she thought that she could present herself there and offer to help because she obviously wanted to know what they knew, right? She obviously figured out at that stage that obviously the camera was left behind. She would have been wondering if they'd got any evidence from the camera, and she boldly walks in. Here I am. I'm offering myself to help here.
one of the reasons I'm here, is because I believe that you know some of these details. And I
Okay.
think you can help us.
I would love to help you in any way that I can.
Okay.
Did you hear yourself telling the detective that you would help them in any way that you could?
Yes.
That's not true, is it?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what help means.
Yes or no? Were you there to help him?
Her first story was that she hadn't seen Travis since April that year, and she had no idea. She was completely ignorant of what happened, but she would be happy to help. Second story, two masked intruders came in and beat up Travis, a male and a female, and they killed Travis. And then the third story is that she did indeed kill Travis, but it was self-defense because she was attacked by Travis and she had gone through months of being abused and mentally destroyed, basically.
I don't know.
Were you there to tell the truth?
No.
Yeah, the
It wasn't
ninjas.
truth, was it, that you were there to help him, was it?
No, that was not the truth.
And in fact, you were there for a different purpose. You were there so that he wouldn't get the truth, right?
No, I was there against my will.
You were there against your will. You didn't have to talk to him, did you?
In hindsight, I
Ma'am,
realized I
yes or
didn't
no?
have to.
Did you have to talk to him? I'm not asking you about hindsight. Isn't it true that you could have chosen not to talk to him, right?
I could have, I think.
And well, you keep saying, I think.
At the time, I didn't know
Ma'am,
that.
I'm asking you, you keep saying, I think. Isn't it true that you had an opportunity to stop talking to him, but you chose to talk to him? Yes or no?
That's true.
And during that time, you told him certain things, right?
Yes,
And in fact, when you spoke to the detective, one of the things that you told him was that you were never there, right?
yes,
And by there, I mean at the crime scene, right?
yes,
And you told us previously, well, the reason that I lied to him was because I was ashamed. Do you remember telling us that?
yes.
Just because you're ashamed, that gives you the right to lie?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Well, ma'am, the fact that you were ashamed, do you think that justifies what you did?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
No,
And do you think, the other thing that you said, well, you know, I knew it was going to happen, but I was trying to postpone the inevitable. Is that what you were doing when you were lying?
no, because the inevitable had occurred.
Pardon?
The inevitable had already occurred.
The inevitable to you was being arrested then, right?
Yes,
So if being arrested had already occurred, then why didn't you tell the truth?
I was ashamed.
So, which is what you told us before, right?
Before when?
Today, isn't that the word that we just talked about? You were ashamed?
Yes,
So are you having problems remembering what you said a couple minutes ago?
no,
So you were ashamed. What could you possibly be ashamed of other than that you killed Travis Alexander, right?
that was the biggest part of the shame.
Oh, so there were other things that you were ashamed of more than killing Mr.
It's heating up.
Alexander then?
Yes,
Objection, mischaracterizes the testimony.
Overruled.
Yes?
yes,
And one of the other things that you were, well,
And she knows it. Look at Carter. Oh, God.
and the reason that you were ashamed of killing Mr. Alexander is because that was going to have some repercussions for you, wasn't there?
part of the reason, yes.
Again, part of the reason. The other reason was that you were feeling scared, right?
That's part of the reason too.
So if you feel scared, you believe that then it's okay to lie.
No, that's not true.
Well, that's what you did though, right?
Yes, it is.
So that's no excuse then, right?
No, it isn't.
And in fact, there's nothing that the detective ever did to get you to say whatever it was that you said at the first interview, right?
Not that I recall.
Well, again, we're with the memory issue. Ma'am, are you having problems remembering what happened back on July 15th of 2008?
No,
So he didn't do anything then, right?
I can't think of any examples.
Right, because he didn't do anything, right?
Anything what?
What are we talking about, ma'am? Are you again having problems understanding what's going on?
Argumentative, Your Honor. If she can't understand his questions, that's.
Overruled. You may answer.
I don't understand his question.
Ma'am, the detective didn't do anything during the interview to cause you to lie, right?
No,
And the detective admonished you or gave you your Miranda warnings, didn't he?
yes,
And he sat and he talked to you, right?
yes,
And one of the other things that you told him was that, well, you were told us here in court was that the reason that you lied was because you were thinking about your family, right?
that was one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons that you told us, right?
Yes,
How is it that, so then what you're telling us, if there's a good reason for it, it's okay to lie?
that's not what I'm telling anyone.
Well, you were saying you were thinking about your family, right?
I did say that.
And that's a good reason or an excuse for you to lie then, right?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, that's the way you try to, didn't you tell us on direct examination that the reason that you lied was because you were thinking in part about your family? Yes or no?
Yes, I said that.
And so then what the way you were conveying it to us was that it was okay. That's a good excuse to lie.
If I conveyed it that way, I didn't mean to.
Well, because you still have a family, right?
Yes,
He's good, Sarah, isn't he?
But you did say that you were concerned about your family, right?
yes, I did.
You were concerned about your reputation, right?
Yes, I was.
And so you were thinking more of yourself when you made this statement to this detective, right?
I'm not sure about that.
That's another thing to bear in mind. Juan Martinez was both the lead investigator on this from the very onset to actually being the prosecutor in the courtroom. You know, I think it clearly meant a lot to him.
Well, other than you, who would be sure about your statement?
God,
Well, God's not here. We can't subpoena him, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure that we can't? Because it seems like you're leaving the door open for that.
Objection, relevant,
God is not in the house.
Your Honor.
With regard to this issue of this interview, it was for, when you lied, it was to benefit you, right?
It was not for my benefit.
Well, it wasn't hurting you when you were lying, was it? If he would have believed your lie, it would have helped you, right?
It was hurting me to lie.
Pardon?
It was hurting me to lie.
It was very what?
It was hurting me to lie.
So in other words, you're saying that when you're talking to this detective, it was hurting your case to lie?
Yes.
You didn't know that at that time, did you?
No.
You took a chance by lying, didn't you?
I wouldn't call it that.
Well, yes, you did take a chance because you were hoping.
Objection, argumentative.
I don't have a question on it.
Finish your question.
You were hoping, ma'am, that he would believe what you were saying so that you could then walk out of that jail, right?
No, that's not right.
What other reason would you have to lie other than that it would benefit you?
I assumed that though that video would become public one day and I didn't want my family to see me admitting to something like that.
So, but you admitted it now.
Yes.
Your family's here, right?
Yes.
There are cameras everywhere, right?
Yes.
What has changed other than geography?
Time.
Time has changed. Oh, so a lie back then can be morphed into the truth now because time has changed, right?
Nothing has been morphed.
Well, you're saying that time has made the change that allows you to say something here, right? That you didn't say before.
An internal change, yes.
So you were saying that back then you were geared to lie.
No.
Well, that's what you said. There's been an internal change, right?
Yes.
And so this internal change, before that internal change, back on July 15th of 2008, that was part of the reason why you lied, this internal issue or change or problem, whatever it was, right?
Yes, I had a problem.
And that problem allowed you to lie, right?
I don't know how to answer that.
Why don't you know how to answer it? You're the one that brought this up about your internal problem.
Objection, asked and answered, argumentative.
Restate your question.
This internal issue that you had, that made it in your
That's what's funny about Juan Martinez. He says a lot of things that the audience, you know, the viewer is actually thinking.
mind okay for you to lie back on July 15th of 2008, right?
I didn't consider it okay.
Well, you didn't consider it bad, did you?
I did.
Well, you kept doing it over and over throughout the whole interview, didn't you?
Yes.
And at no time did you stop the interview and say to yourself, this is not the thing to do, right?
I did.
You did tell him something different during that interview?
No, you said say to yourself, not him.
So, but when you're talking to yourself, no one can hear you, right?
Yes.
And it's
Unless I'm
really
talking
hard
out
for
loud.
people to corroborate what you're thinking if we don't know what you say, right?
Yes.
So we have to take your word that that's what you were thinking internally, right?
Yes. But it crossed
Yes
my
or
mind.
no? Yes or no?
I said yes.
And so with this interview, you then started to talk about whether or not you had been in Arizona, right?
Yes.
You said, no, you hadn't been in Arizona, right?
That's right.
That's an absolute lie, right?
Yes.
And the reason that you didn't want to admit to being in Arizona is because you knew that you had killed Travis Alexander, right?
Yes.
You didn't tell that to the detective, right?
That's right.
And additionally, during that whole interview, you gave excuse after excuse as to why you weren't the person that had done this, right?
Yes.
So safe to say that the whole interview was a lie, right?
Not the whole interview, but anything regarding my presence there on June 4th, yes.
Anything having to do with responsibility in this crime was a lie, correct?
Yes.
And the reason you did that was because it was to your benefit, right?
Objection, asked and answered, Mr.
Overruled.
Testimony.
That's not the reason I did it.
Well, it didn't hurt you, did it, back then? In the moment, it didn't hurt you, did it?
It did.
How did it hurt you in the moment if you had already been charged? It didn't change anything.
What do you mean?
In the moment, at that time, how could it possibly have hurt you since you'd already been charged? It wouldn't have, it didn't change anything, did it?
It did change things to lie.
Well, it didn't change where you were staying, did it?
No,
It didn't change the fact that you were still charged, right?
that's right.
It didn't change anything, the fact that you lied at that point, right?
That's not right.
What did it change, man? Tell me what it changed on that day.
It probably changed my whole future.
I'm not asking about your future. I'm asking what it changed on that
You're right about that, Jodie.
day.
Sustained.
Ma'am, the other, you had time to think about.
She should be able to give us time to answer.
Answer what? There's no question.
Yeah, there was.
I think she answered the question. Continue.
Ma'am, after that interview, you then had another chance to have a conversation with Detective Flores the next day, right?
Yes,
And again, it was a voluntary conversation, wasn't it?
yes,
And it was the same situation as the day before, right? He sat down, he asked you questions, right?
yes,
On the previous day, he really hadn't given you too much information about the crime, right?
not too much.
No. And it was actually during the second interview that he started to give you some information, right?
Yes,
And in fact, he showed you some photographs, right?
I think that was the 16th, yes.
Excuse me?
I think that was on the 16th.
Why don't you just pull the microphone a little bit closer? So you think that it was on the 16th when he provided you more information, right?
Yes, if I remember correctly.
And one of the things that you said was that somehow you weren't very sophisticated in dealing with law enforcement. You told us that during direct examination, right?
That's correct.
And just because you're not sophisticated or haven't dealt with law enforcement in the past, do you think that that gives you an excuse to lie?
No,
But you did it anyway, right?
yes, I did.
And you told us that, yes, you were unsophisticated with law enforcement, right?
Yes,
So then what difference does it make if you're unsophisticated with law enforcement in terms of telling the truth or a lie?
I don't know.
But you brought it up on direct examination, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you did it because you wanted people to feel sorry for you, right?
No,
Overruled.
no,
But it didn't have anything to do with the conversation that you had with Detective Flores, did it?
what?
That you were unsophisticated.
I don't understand.
He asked you questions, ma'am, and you gave him answers on July 16th of 2008, right?
That's right.
The fact that you may not have dealt with another police officer before didn't change the fact that he was asking you questions and you were answering, right?
Yes,
It didn't change the fact that he was speaking English to you, right?
that's right.
And you understood what he was asking, right?
Mostly, yes.
Are you saying that you didn't understand what Detective Flores was asking you during that interview?
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, I'm asking you whether or not you understood what he was asking you if he was speaking English.
I understood the English words, sometimes not the meaning of the question.
Oh, so you're going behind the meaning of the question to say that maybe you didn't understand his motive for the question, right?
I'm not sure if I was considering his motive.
Well, you said that you're not sure about whether or not you understood the question because of what was behind the question, right?
His meaning, yes.
His meaning. Well, his meaning can be expressed through his words, right?
Yes,
He was asking you certain things, and then you were answering whatever it was that you wanted to answer, right?
yes,
And you chose to change your story from the day before, right?
yes,
And you chose to change the story was because it benefited you, right?
no,
Well, there's a reason that you changed your story, right?
yes,
Because the story the day before didn't work, right?
I don't know.
Well, you were still in jail, right?
Yes,
And nothing had changed, right?
not that I remember.
Well, again, I ask you, do you have problems with your memory about any events? It seems like you keep telling me that you have problems with your memory. Do you have problems with your memory?
Occasionally,
You didn't seem to have any problems on direct examination when you were talking to us about all the sexual exploits with Mr. Alexander, did you?
I did have problems.
You regaled us for days on end about his exploits, didn't you?
I wouldn't say regaled.
Okay, you told us about it for days on end, didn't you?
I just answered the questions I
Yes
was
or
asked.
no? You told us. When the question was posed, you told us, didn't you?
To the best of my recollection.
Is anybody saying that you didn't do it to the best of your recollection?
You're implying that?
Ma'am, isn't it true that what the
She's really hoping the jury's with her, isn't she? Those glances over to the jury box after every answer.
prosecutor's implying is that you knew too much during the direct examination? If we're talking about implications,
Well, then that would be false.
well, isn't it true that you had a great memory when you were on direct examination with regard to issues involving Mr. Alexander's sexual exploits?
Objection, I'm going to ask an answer.
Sustained, rephrase.
You told us a lot about you and Mr. Alexander's sexual dalliances, right?
Yes,
And you were able to give us dates, right?
usually.
Well, a lot of the times you were able to give us dates, right?
Yes,
You were able to tell us what happened, right?
usually.
Well, a lot of the time. For example, the first time that, according to you, you had oral sex, you were able to tell us when that was, right?
Yes,
You were able to tell us how it happened, right?
yes,
You were able to tell us where it was, right?
yes,
And that was before July 16th of 2008, wasn't it?
yes.
That was in November of 2006, right?
No.
When was it then?
A week after we met, September
So when was that?
2006.
It was in 2006, and so a week after you met what, in June what?
Early September 2006.
So you do have a good memory, right? You just showed me that you'd have a good memory for events that occurred before July 16th of 2008, right?
I reviewed those things, so I memorized them.
Oh, so you actually sat down and you memorized it. How is it that what did you memorize it from?
Date and timestamps.
I know, but what did you memorize it from, Matt? Are you
Photographs.
talking that you sat down with a police report and then you memorized it?
No, they were photographs.
Pardon?
They were photos.
Family photos?
Photos.
Photographs. So you looked at some photographs then, right?
Yes.
Oh, so there were photographs of the first time that you had oral intercourse with Mr. Alexander?
No.
Well, then what is it that you reviewed that gives you this knowledge?
Photographs of the convention in Las Vegas 2006 that were date and time stamped.
So it was in July of 2006, is this when this happened, right?
September.
And it was in September of 2006 that were there photographs of it?
Convention, yes.
Were there photographs at or near the time of this oral sex that you regaled us with?
I don't think so.
So but you do have an independent recollection of it, don't you?
What do you mean by that?
Do you have an independent memory of having oral intercourse with Mr. Alexander the first time it happened?
You mean, I don't know what you mean. Independent of what?
Do you have a memory of the first time you had oral intercourse with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
So you do remember it then, right?
Yes.
And you remember where it was, right?
Yes.
So that event was before this July 16th of 2008 interview, right?
Yes.
That was further in time, right?
Yes.
You didn't seem to have too much of a memory problem with that, right?
That's right.
Did you ever review anything else with regard to the July 16th, 2008 interview?
Very briefly, it makes me sick
Is
to my
that a yes or
stomach.
no?
I guess that would be yes.
So you did review parts, at least according to you, the way you're saying it, of the interview that you had on July 16th of 2008, right?
Yes,
And you're saying that your memory of what happened on July 16th of 2008 is so clouded today that it's only based on that review?
no, that's not what I'm saying.
You do have an independent recollection of it then, right?
What do you mean by independent?
Independent means coming from inside of your head.
It's based on what I've reviewed.
So everything that you have told us then in this case is based on what you reviewed?
I'm referring to July 16th.
So everything with regard to July 16th is based on what you reviewed. You don't have any other recollection.
Not everything, but most of it.
Do you remember that you lied?
Yes.
And do you remember what you lied about?
Yes.
Sir. And do you remember that you lied about the killing of Travis Alexander, right?
Yes.
And that, you know, is a change from what you said the day before, right?
Yes.
And it was a drastic change, right?
Yes.
It was a total change because now it was, you were there, right?
Yes.
You knew that that would be important, right?
Yes.
And in fact, what you were trying to do is because the detective had already told you about the fingerprints, didn't he?
I think he did, yes.
And he also told you about the hair that was there, correct?
Yes.
You guys talked about DNA analysis, didn't you?
Yes.
And he talked about, and he showed you the photograph with a foot in it, with your foot in it. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So after he showed, and you don't deny that that's your foot in the photograph, do you?
I don't deny it.
And after he told you that, that's when you changed your story, didn't you?
Yes.
Because, and you changed your story to conform with the forensic evidence that he was telling you about, right?
That's right.
And that was because you wanted to make up a story that conformed with that, with what he was telling you, right?
Yes, as much as possible.
Because you did not want any consequences with regard to the killing of Travis Alexander, right?
I wasn't concerned about consequences at that point.
Ma'am, do you think it's a good excuse to lie just because this detective is giving you some forensic evidence?
No.
But it's a good reason to lie if you want to get out of whatever you are being talked about, right?
That wasn't my goal. So,
Well, was your goal to go to prison?
no. Not a physical prison on earth, no.
Well, ma'am, was your goal to, so your goal was not to go to prison then, right?
It wasn't a goal of mine, I can say.
And in fact, that was something that you were trying to avoid, right?
I don't know. I was trying to kill myself, I think.
Ma'am,
Absolutely, Sarah. That's one of the major things about anyone that has a kind of borderline personality disorder is that they're completely incapable of being aware of how they're coming across to the average person, you know. Um, and she's atypical of a BBT type of character. And it gives her, in a sense, it gives her an advantage because she has that confidence in herself, right? She's not insecure about how she's coming across.
you've said that many times, that you tried to kill yourself, right? In court.
I don't know that many, but I've recounted a time that I did.
You've said it more than 3, 4, 5 times, right?
Perhaps.
And in fact, one of the things that you told us about was that, well, when you were in the Maricopa County Jail, that you tried to kill yourself, right?
No, Siskiyou County Jail.
Siskiyou County Jail. So you do remember that. And that when you tried to do that, you took some Advil. Do you remember telling us about that?
Yes.
And that what you did then is you took some razor, right?
Yes.
And that you cut yourself, right?
It was a nick.
It was a nick. And because it stung so much, that you said, nah, this is not the way for me to go, right?
I didn't say that. I
You
just,
said it stung and that's why you stopped. Isn't that what your direct testimony was?
that night, yes.
Right. And that's the night that I'm talking to you about, right?
Yes.
I'm not talking to you about any other night, am I?
It sounded like you were.
No. Just to be clear, I'm not talking about any other night, am I? Do you understand that?
Okay, I understand that.
And you nicked yourself and it hurt, right?
Yes.
And I think the word that you used, stung, right?
Yes.
To use your standard, ma'am, of how you stopped because it stung. Can you imagine how much it must have hurt Mr. Alexander when you stuck that knife right into his chest? That really must have hurt, right?
Argumentative.
Sustained. Okay. Let me continue.
You also told a story, right? To the
Yes.
detective, right?
Yes.
And your story was that it was two individuals that came in, right?
Yes.
And one individual was a male, right?
Yes.
And another one was a female.
Okay, so this is the first point in this entire cross-examination in this whole trial where you can see the cracks starting to form. Okay, she's really starting to break now at this point, and it's taken, well, a whole day of cross-examination already from the first 3 parts that I played, and this is the second day, and you can see she's breaking, right?
Right?
Yes.
And you know that the police are going to follow up on that, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Do you think that police don't investigate crimes, that if somebody provides them a lead, do you think that they don't go out and try to find out if it's true or not?
Objection, Mr. Rollins.
Did you consider the consequences of your lie?
No.
No, because it was all about you, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Didn't consider the consequences, but yet you went even further than saying that it was two people, right? You said other things, right?
Yes.
And that was totally different than what you had said the day before, right?
Yes.
And what you said was that these people, you were taking a photograph, right?
Yes.
You never mentioned anything about dropping a camera, did you?
No.
And you never mentioned anything about running down the hallway or anything like that, did you?
No.
And what you did say is that you were down, somebody hit you on the head, right?
Yes.
That you heard a pop, right?
Yes.
And that while this was going on, you heard Mr. Alexander moaning or uttering some words, right?
Screaming.
Screaming. And you heard him screaming to go, you said that he was screaming to go to the neighbors, right?
Yes.
And at some point you said that you saw Mr. Alexander on all fours, right?
Yes.
And he couldn't move his feet or feel his legs, right?
I said that he said that.
Pardon?
I said that he said that.
But he wasn't moving, was he?
He was
According to your story, he wasn't moving, was he?
I don't remember. He was lethargic is what I think I said. He said. I said
And
that he said.
you weren't able to get him out of there, according to your story, right?
That's correct.
But you were able, at some point, according to you, get out of there, right?
Yes.
And that's what you told the detective, right?
Yes.
And the reason you told the detective this lie was because you didn't want to be charged in this case, didn't you?
That's not the reason.
Was the reason that you told him that because you did want to be charged in this case?
What did you say?
I said, was the reason that you told him that because you did want to be charged in this case?
Because I did.
Yes, you said you didn't. Ma'am, didn't you just tell me that the reason you told him that was not because you didn't want to be charged? That's what you just said, right?
That wasn't the reason I told him that. That's correct.
Well, you didn't tell him the story just so you could be charged, right?
That's also correct.
So you told him a story for a reason, right?
Yes.
Is it the embarrassment factor now?
That was part of it.
And so it's more important to you about your feelings of embarrassment than to tell the truth?
You say that as present tense, that's not correct.
I'm talking about back on July 16th of 2008. Your feelings of embarrassment were more important than telling the truth, right?
I didn't really weigh importance.
Well, you said that one of the reasons that you didn't tell the truth was because of embarrassment, right?
I think shame would be more correct.
All right, let's go with the word shame then. Because of you were thinking of shame back then, that's why.
I actually do believe her there. I think she does have a lot of shame. I really do, despite the fact that she's in a position where she's having to portray this false narrative, right, of being the abused victim. I definitely sense shame in her.
You didn't tell him the truth, right?
That's just part of the reason, the
Part of
bigger
it.
part.
And that shame is what, on you?
Yes,
And you are ashamed because you killed him? Is that what it is?
I was definitely ashamed of that and other things.
But you were also.
There's definitely shame, regret, and some grief. And it comes out.
Also ashamed that it would get out that you were the person that did it, right?
Certainly.
And so, to you, the fact that your feelings, in this case being ashamed, are so strong back then that that was an excuse, a good excuse for your lie, right?
It wasn't the sole deciding factor, but it was a big reason.
It was a big reason, but my question is much more direct than that. My question is, this feeling ashamed was more important to you then than telling the truth.
I wouldn't say important, but it felt stronger.
All right, to use your phrase, your feeling of being ashamed was strong back then to the point that it overrode your telling the truth, right?
That's right.
But that's no excuse, is it?
No,
Nothing that you might have been feeling at that time was an excuse to lie, right?
that's right.
But you still chose to do it, right?
Yes,
Because it would have benefited you, whether it was because you felt ashamed or because you didn't want to tell about it, right?
I wasn't thinking of benefits.
What's that?
I was not thinking of benefits.
Well, you weren't thinking of telling the truth, were you?
I was thinking about it.
But you didn't do it.
No, I didn't.
And this factor of being ashamed. What other factors did you consider, ma'am?
I considered if I told the truth, then I would have to explain why. And if I had to explain why, then I would have to go back through our whole history, back to things that he was very ashamed of, that I was ashamed of, that I just didn't want to get out.
But didn't you just,
I don't know about you guys, but I can sense a lot of truth in some of what she's saying. There's some nuggets of truth in there, right? I mean, she's having to parlay this with the kind of narrative that she's presenting to try and get off with this, right? But there's little nuggets of truth in what she's saying.
in this trial, haven't you through 8 days tell us all of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it was 9 days.
Okay, 9 days. You have a good memory. For 9 days, you told us all of that stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, it wasn't based on my memory. Someone told me 9 days.
What? What do you mean? What did you just say? Somebody told you what?
You said I had a good memory because I corrected you, but it wasn't based on my memory. Someone had said I was on the stand for 9 days, so that's why I said 9.
So it isn't on. So what you're testifying to isn't necessarily what you know. That is what you're telling us, right?
It's what I believe.
Well, you just said that it's what somebody told you, right?
Yes.
So, are you testifying based on what something somebody told you instead of what you know?
In that case, yeah. The
Well,
9
no,
days.
not in that case. I'm talking about what you're telling us here today. Are you telling us these things because you know them or because somebody told you?
The things I'm saying right now are because I know them.
Except for the number of days you were on this witness stand, right? That one, somebody told you that one.
Someone told me that one, and it sounded accurate.
And then so you used that to correct the prosecutor, right? Even though you
That's
didn't
correct.
remember.
Yes.
with regard to that day, you said that all of this stuff, information, whatever you want to call it, was out there and you didn't want it to come out, right?
It wasn't out there. I didn't want it to be out there.
So what you're saying is, I guess, is that you were being a good Samaritan, right? In lying.
I wouldn't say that.
Thanks.
Well, you were saying that you didn't want this stuff to come out about Mr. Alexander and your relationship with him, right?
That's right.
So you were being a good person, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, do you think that that's an excuse that to not tell the truth, that you wanted to hide information?
No.
So you did hide information in addition to lying, right?
Yes.
But the detective isn't the only person that you lied to, right?
That's right.
You lied to a lot of people, right?
Everyone.
And there's different reasons that you had for lying to everyone, right?
Yes.
And in fact, one of the people that you lied to was Ryan Burns, right?
Yes.
Ryan Burns is this individual that you had a romantic interest in, right?
Yes.
In fact, in order to see whether or not the spark was there, you went all the way to Utah, right?
That was my goal.
Well, it was your goal, but you made it there, right?
Yes, but not for the reason you stated.
So you weren't there to go see him to see if there was any romantic interest?
Not on June 5th.
In general, the shame with personality disorders has to be repressed. The shame surfaces, then needs to be buried again. It's too painful to their false ego. Yeah, I agree with all that.
On June 5th, when you started your trip, part of your trip. So you're saying then that he was an afterthought?
Yeah, he was.
So he was just an alibi then?
Yeah, well, no, not an alibi.
Well, if he's an afterthought, then if he's an afterthought, that means the primary thought that you had when you left Wairika back on June 2nd was to see Travis Alexander then. If Mr. Burns was an afterthought, as you say.
That's not correct.
Well, that's what you said, right?
No,
Mr.
that's what
Burns
you
was
said.
Mr. Burns was an afterthought, right?
No, he was an afterthought after June 4th.
Okay, so before that, he was a priority thought.
He was the reason for the trip.
So he was the reason for the trip, right?
Yes.
And the reason for the trip to go see him was to see whether or not there was a romantic interest, right?
That's why I planned the trip.
Right. That's my question. You wanted to see if there was going to be any sparks between you and Mr. Burns, right?
Yes.
And you had not seen him before that date in the sense that you hadn't been with him alone, correct?
That's correct.
You hadn't been out on a date with him before, right?
That's right.
You had only done the text messaging, right?
And phone calls and
Well,
emails.
is that a yes or a no, text messaging?
That would be yes.
And with regard to the telephone calls, you had done that, right?
Yes.
And you'd done that instant messaging thing, right?
I can't remember if that was before or after June 4th.
Well, but you did do that with him, though, right?
Yes.
Do you remember sending him an instant message saying something to the effect, this is a test, before you went out to see him? Remember seeing that?
I remember seeing this as a test, but I don't recall the date.
And because of this interaction, you decided to go see him, right?
Yes.
And when you got there, one of the things that you said was that, well, I needed to keep up the facade, right?
That's right.
So you lied about getting lost, right?
Yeah, Sarah, I think she thinks that she's going to be able to use Juan's aggressive manner against him to kind of reiterate the point that she is a victim, right? I think that's what she thinks she's doing. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if she's aware of how she's coming across, right? I think I can sense a little bit of panic coming into her mind at this point. I think she's aware that this might not be going exactly the way she planned.
Yes,
You didn't get lost that day, right?
I did get lost.
Oh, so you did get lost. So it was true then. This trip to see Mr. Alexander, it was because you got lost.
That's not why.
Huh? Where did you get, if you could tell us, because you were lost, where did you get lost, ma'am?
My understanding is it was somewhere in
Not your
Arizona.
understanding. I want you to tell me where you got lost, not what somebody else may have told you.
Objection, Your Honor, she should be allowed to answer the question.
Answer it.
My understanding is that I was
Ma'am,
lost somewhere in Arizona.
you're not being responsive. I'm asking you to tell me where you drove physically to the point where you got lost. Where did it start that you got, where does the beginning of your getting lost start?
Again, I'm going to object, Your Honor. She asked the question. She was in the middle of answering and he interrupted. She should be allowed to answer this
All right,
question.
overruled. Change the question.
Ma'am, when was the first time you realized you were lost?
When I couldn't power on my phone, it was dark.
Was this before or after you killed Mr. Alexander?
After,
And this is where you pulled off the side of the road, right?
yes,
And then you continued to drive from that point to see Mr. Burns, right?
After she killed Travis, I think the next day she left a few voicemails, pretending to be, casual and wondering what he was up to. We should meet up at some point. Hey, how are you? That kind of thing.
I just drove at
I
that point.
understand that you say you just drove, but from that point on, you did get a chance to speak to Mr. Burns, right?
Yes,
And in fact, one of the first person that you actually called once you got your phone charged was Matt McCartney, right?
yes,
And he's somebody that you are very close to, right?
somewhat, yes,
He's a very good friend, right?
yes.
He's an ally, right?
I don't know what you mean by ally.
Someone who will not betray you.
No, he's betrayed me.
So, and you're talking about the fact that he saw somebody else, right? When he was with you, right? Is that what you're talking about, the betrayal?
That's only one of the times he's betrayed me.
So you've never told somebody.
I think when she says that someone betrayed her, what she's actually meaning is that someone on the outside just told the actual truth.
For example, like 48 hours, that he was somebody that will not betray you.
I did say that on 48 hours.
So which is it? Is he going to betray you or is he not going to betray you? What is it?
Well, hopefully not.
Well, hopefully not means you're not answering the question. You just told us that he did betray you, yet now you're saying that in an interview with 48 hours, you said he would not betray you. So which is it?
I'm going to object to the relevance of any of this.
Overruled.
Well, when I made that statement to 48 hours, it was my belief that he would not.
It was your way of what?
My belief that he would not betray me.
With regard to any issues that were presented at the time that you made the telephone call to him after you killed Mr. Alexander, right?
With regard to that, when I said that in September versus
Right. With
June.
regard to the call, if you told him anything, he wouldn't betray you, right?
That's what I said in September 2008.
And that's what you believed in September of 2008, right?
In September 2008, yes.
So you're out there and you try to call Mr. McCartney, and so you say that you're lost, but one of the other things that you say that you do is that you get out of the car, right?
Yes,
And you clean up, right?
yes.
That's because you knew what you had done, right?
I don't remember thinking that.
Well, I'm not asking you whether or not you remember thinking that. Isn't that the reason why you did it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, you knew that you had killed Mr. Alexander at that point, right?
It's hard to describe.
Yes or no? It's a yes or no sort of situation.
It's not really. It's
It is.
something. It's not.
So in your mind, back then, when you're on the side of the road, you don't know if you killed him, right? That's what you're saying.
I can't really say it wasn't in my mind, like, it was kind of not there. It's kind of
You
weird.
weren't there, right? What you're saying is you weren't there, right? That's what you just said, right? That you weren't there. That's what you just said, right?
Weren't there
And
in my
so-
head.
And so if you weren't there, though, you were there enough to pick up the phone and call Matthew McCartney, right? You were
Yes.
there enough for that, right?
Yes,
You were there enough to call Ryan Burns, right?
after a while, yes.
You were there enough for that. And you were there enough to make a call to Travis Alexander, weren't you?
Yes,
So you were there for those purposes, but you weren't there to tell me about what you were thinking, though, right? Is that what you're saying?
it depends on the time period.
How about the time when you got out and you started to wash your hands?
By then, I wasn't thinking that. I just knew something awful had happened because I had blood on my hands and my
You
feet.
started to wash your hands. And so you knew that those were for Mr. Alexander, didn't you?
I think I did, yes.
You think you did, but again, you're telling us you're not sure, right?
I'm not telling you that.
Well, you had blood on your hands, right?
That's right.
And you had been driving, right?
Yes,
According to you, you had been at Mr. Alexander's house, right?
yes,
There had been a fight, right?
yes,
And you had done something, right?
yes,
And this doing something had caused Mr. Alexander to bleed, right?
yes.
And so if that's the case and you have blood on your hands, wouldn't you think that the blood came from Mr. Alexander?
I had cuts too, so
So you're thinking that the cuts could have come from you stabbing him?
I didn't have any recall of stabbing him at that
Well
point in
then,
time.
so you don't have any idea where your cuts come from then, at that point?
No, I had cut myself on June 4th, early in the morning before we went to bed.
So you cut yourself on the glass, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Is this the situation where you're saying that you cut yourself on your right hand, right?
yes,
Your left hand.
Yeah, after he killed Travis, she went down to see Ryan Burns, and she spent like 2-3 hours smooching with Ryan, and then left again. Crazy.
Right?
I'm both.
Do you know who Mark Jodie? You're ambidextrous. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, depending on the activity.
Well, do you remember indicating to 48 hours that you're a lefty?
Yes,
So what is it? Are you left or right?
depends on the activity.
And what activity do you right left-handed?
I write with both, but I'm more proficient with my left.
And so with regard to this being out there, so you're out there and you've made these calls, you've got out, and you find your charger, right? Is that when you find the charger?
When I pulled over, yes.
And at some point, you're able to make a telephone call to Mr. Burns, right?
Yes,
And then starts the line to him, right?
yes,
And so at some point, then you drive all the way up to see him, and you get there around 11 o'clock in the morning, right?
I think so, yes.
Well, in between 11 and noon, would that be accurate?
I believe it was before noon.
And after 11, right?
I think so. I wasn't paying
But-
attention at the time, but it was late morning.
Okay, and you go up there, you have this meeting, and when you go up there to see him, you're telling us that you still don't know if Mr. Alexander is dead, right? That's what you're telling us, right?
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, so you do know that he's dead then.
I have a, it's like I wasn't accepting it or looking at it in my
Well-
mind.
Acceptance and knowing are two different things. Wouldn't you agree, ma'am?
I was in a strong state of denial.
Ma'am, that's not my question to you. My question is accepting and knowing are two different things. Don't you agree?
Yes. I
And
agree.
so what you're saying is that you weren't accepting it. What that means is that you knew it. You just didn't want to deal with it. That's what you're saying, right?
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, you're the one that talked about acceptance, right? You just said that right now, correct?
That's correct.
And so by acceptance, it means you don't want to deal with it, right?
I don't know.
Well, you're the one that used that word. Why wouldn't you know?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
I don't know. My mind wasn't right during that whole period.
Well, you're throwing up your hands and you're saying that your mind wasn't right, but that's not the issue. The issue here is whether or not you knew he was dead, and it appears, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're saying you did know that he was dead.
I believe that I knew he was dead.
Okay, so you knew he was dead. And when you went to see Mr. Burns, you were the same person that you had been before. You were happy, smiling, right?
I was not, but I was trying to portray that.
You were trying to portray that to lie to him, right? Put up a facade, right?
Yes, him and all my friends.
Pardon?
Him and all my friends.
I'm asking about Mr. Burns, all right? With regard to Mr. Burns, you were trying to put up a facade for him, right?
That's right.
You wanted to pretend that you were happy, right?
Yes.
And the reason that you wanted to pretend that you were happy is because you wanted to see if there was any spark with Mr. Burns, right?
That was the furthest thing from my mind at that point.
Okay, so if that's the furthest thing from your mind, then the closest thing in your mind is the fact that you killed Mr. Alexander, right?
Wasn't thinking of it in those terms.
Well, but isn't that sort of what you're telling us now?
It was something to that effect.
And so you go on through the day, and there's this meeting that takes place with Mr. Burns and one of his associates at a restaurant, right?
Yes.
And you follow along, and then after that, after the meeting, you go back to Mr. Burns's place, right?
Yes.
And now it's the afternoon, right?
Yes.
And during the afternoon, when you're with Mr. Burns, you begin to kiss him, right?
Yes.
And that's because you want to put up a facade, right?
I guess that's part of the reason.
Well, no, you said when you were on direct that that was the reason you wanted to put up a facade, right?
Objection, mischaracterizes her testimony.
Restate the question.
Man, with regard to Mr. Burns and kissing him, was the reason that you kissed him because you wanted to put up a facade?
That was one of the reasons.
All right, and the other reason was that you wanted to see if there was a spark between the two of you, right?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
That's not right.
But you did kiss him though, right?
Yes, I did.
Knowing that Mr. Alexander was dead, right?
I guess so.
Well, no, we don't want you to guess. We want you to know. And if you don't know, you can tell me that. Did you just tell me previously that you knew that Mr. Alexander was dead?
It's hard to explain.
Man, what is hard to explain about a person breathing or not breathing? What is so difficult? Why is that a difficult concept for you?
Because I'd never killed anyone before.
Okay, so because you've never killed anyone before, then you're having a problem deciding whether or not the person is dead, right?
I'm having a hard time describing what my state of mind was during that time.
If you hadn't killed anybody before and you didn't know if he was dead, then why did you just leave him to die?
Objection is irrelevant.
Overruled.
I don't think I did that.
Well, sure, you just told us that you'd never killed anybody before and you didn't know. So what you're telling us is that you left them to die, didn't you?
I don't believe that.
Okay, so then you did know he was dead. Can't have it both ways. Which one is it?
Objection, Your Honor. Argument, she's already explained her state of mind. She's not a psychologist.
Sustained as to the question. Rephrase.
At the time you were kissing Mr. Burns' lips, did you know he was dead, yes or no? And by he, I mean Mr. Alexander.
Objection, asked and answered, Judge.
Overruled.
I think I did.
Okay? And so, but yet you continued kissing Mr. Burns anyway, right?
I don't know.
You mean you don't remember him, that you guys were continually making out, or not continually, but were making out before you went out for the evening?
I don't remember making out with him before we went out for the evening.
But you were kissing him, whatever that means, right?
We kissed.
Then you went to this training that was in the evening, correct?
It wasn't a training, it was a business briefing.
So it was a briefing in the evening, right?
Yes,
And it was at a college, I believe, correct?
I don't remember.
And is that when you drove with Leslie Jodie or not?
I don't remember. I think I might have followed Ryan to the place where the meeting was.
And when you went to this place, that's where you met up with Leslie Jodie, right?
Yes,
And then after that, there was a meeting where you guys went to Chili's, right?
I'm not sure what restaurant it was.
All right, so you went to a restaurant, correct?
That's correct.
And when you went to this restaurant,
Yeah, the rage was intense. Jodie thought that she was going to be invited to this trip down to Cancun with Travis, and he had promised her that he was going to take her, and he didn't. He decided to take someone else, and I think the fact that she had moved up near where he was staying as well, she was hoping that it was going to kind of work out, right? And she just obviously lost her mind.
before you went in, you were talking to Leslie Jodie, right? In the car.
It was either before we went in or after, but at one point we were in the parking lot discussing things.
And you talked to her for about an hour, right?
I don't remember how long.
It was not 5 minutes, it was longer than 5 minutes,
It
right?
was longer than 5 minutes.
And during that time, that's when you told her that you looked forward to the future when your kids, those that you were going to have, and Mr. Alexander's kids could play together at PPL meetings, right?
Yes,
That was a lie. Wasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor, this is what she was hoping, it's not a definitive fact.
You can see her being stripped bare at this point, right?
can you please restate the question?
You lied to Leslie Jodie when you told her that it was your hope that your kids and Mr. Alexander's kids played together at PPL events.
No, that was a hope of mine.
Pardon?
That was a hope of mine.
Oh, so you're saying that you thought he was alive at that time then, for you to have that hope?
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, if you're saying that and you know he's dead, why are you lying to her?
I had that hope.
How can you say
Because she had to.
as you sit here today, ma'am, that that was your hope when you knew he was dead? You can't have it both ways.
Objection, Your Honor, this characterizes her testimony.
Overruled.
It was a hope of mine. And the fact that he had died didn't change my hope. It just made that hope unrealistic.
Oh, so the way you're saying now is the way you phrased it to her was that you hoped that your kids could play with his kids, not that that's what you wanted. Is that what you're saying now?
Objection, this characterizes her testimony again.
Overruled. You may answer.
That's not what was said, actually.
Well, if you don't know what was said, then why are you telling me that you said hope? That you hoped?
I didn't say I don't know what was said.
Pardon?
I didn't say I don't know what was said.
Well, did you use the word hope?
I might have used the word hope.
And if that's the case, if you use the word hope, then what you're telling us is that that was your hope, even though he was dead, right?
That was a hope of mine.
Don't you think that that's a lie, knowing what you knew at the time?
No, because I'm just stating a wish that I had.
Oh, so that was your wish even though you had killed him.
Yes, it was my wish.
And the other thing that you told her was that you and he were great friends, right?
Yes.
And you never mentioned anything about what happened at his house, did you?
That's right.
That was omitting important information, wasn't it?
Yes.
Ma'am, do you know somebody by the name of Mark Jodie?
Yes.
He was there that night at that restaurant, wasn't he?
I believe he was.
And in fact, he sat next to you, didn't he?
I think so, yes.
So it's your testimony that you did not, knowing that he was there that night, so is it your testimony that you did not have any cuts to your left hand?
I had cuts on my right hand for sure, and I don't remember about my left.
So it could be then that you did have cuts on your left hand, right? Correct?
It could be, but I didn't have Band-Aids on my left hand.
I'm not asking you about Band-Aids. Maybe that's the problem here. I'm asking whether or not you had cuts on your left hand.
I don't recall. I remember my right hand was cut.
So, but it could be that you did, right?
Possibly.
And Mr. Jodie was sitting right next to you, right?
Yes.
And because you were eating, he was in a position to see your hands, right?
Overruled.
I would think so.
Pardon?
I would think so.
Right, because your hands were above the table, right?
Yes.
You know whether or not you had gauze on your cuts.
No, they were Band-Aids.
So you're saying you had Band-Aids on your cuts, right?
On my right hand.
Okay, but you don't remember whether or not you had any Band-Aids on your left hand, right?
I did not have Band-Aids on my left hand.
You just may have had cuts. Is that what you're saying?
If I did, I don't remember, but I guess it's possible.
Well, you keep saying that it's possible. Why would you say now that it's possible that you would have cuts on your left hand? What makes you think that you might have cuts on your left hand?
Nothing makes me think that.
Well, then why are you saying it's possible? Aren't you really telling me that you didn't have any cuts on your left hand?
Not that I remember.
Okay, not that you remember means there's the possibility that it could be, right?
That's what I'm saying.
So there is a possibility that it could be. You don't remember. So if somebody else says that there may be, you wouldn't have any reason to quibble with that.
Objection, argument, proper question.
Overruled.
I don't know.
And you don't know because you don't remember, is that it?
I don't know because I didn't have Band-Aids on my left. I had them on my right.
Now, one of the other things that happened after that is that at some point you then returned back to Mr. Burns' home, right?
Yes.
And you return back to Mr. Burns' house and you guys go to sleep.
She's losing strength because she never expected Juan Martinez to be this thorough. She was very strong in the first 3 parts of this, but you can see that she's gradually breaking down.
Right?
Yes.
You set your clock, or the clock is set so that you can get up, right?
Yes.
You need to get back to work, right?
Yes.
And you need to get back to work. Margaritaville?
No.
You never worked at Margaritaville at that time, right?
I don't know that there's any place called Margaritaville, so no.
So the answer is no, right?
That's right.
And so it's also true that if you broke a glass at work and you cut your hand, it wouldn't have been at a place called Margaritaville, right?
That's right.
Once you're there with Mr. Burns, you do wake up at some point, right?
Yes.
There's a movie that you guys were watching at some point also, correct?
Yes.
And when you wake up, you became passionate with him, right? You started to kiss him, didn't you?
Not passionate, yes, kissing.
You were what?
Not passionate, but yes, kissing.
And at some point, isn't it true that you quote unquote adjusted him?
I helped him adjust himself.
Okay, but if you helped him adjust himself, there was some adjusting that was going on, right?
That's right.
And that means that you moved his buttocks, is what we're talking about, right?
No,
Didn't you move his body then so that he would be more, his body would be more available to yours?
no,
You didn't get on top of him and grind on top of him with your clothing on.
no.
That's not anything that you did, right?
I did not grind that guy.
You didn't, perhaps the Mormons, without getting too much into it, you and Mr. Alexander did this grinding, didn't you?
Yes,
And that means something in your relationship, doesn't it?
I don't know.
Well, you just said that you and Mr. Alexander did this, right?
Yes, I did.
And that meant that your genitalia rubbed against each other, right?
Yes,
So what you're saying is that your genitalia did not rub against Mr. Burns' genitalia, correct?
that's correct.
But you did get on top of him, right? Around the waist area.
No, I got off of him. I fell asleep on top of him.
And no, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking whether or not while you're kissing him, you got on top of his waist area. That's what I'm asking.
I think I was laying next to him.
You keep saying think. I want you to tell me whether or not you got on top of Mr. Burns and placed your genitalia, where it would be, I know you were clothed, on top of his. That's what I'm asking.
No, I got off from being on top of him.
So if you got off from being on top of him, at some point you had to be on top of him then, right?
Yes,
And so you were on top of his genitalia with your body. Part of
No.
your body was on top of his, right?
no, I was on top of his stomach.
Okay, and what you're saying is you were on top of his stomach with your legs spread or not?
I don't recall. We were in the love sack.
Pardon? I know you were in the love sack, but I'm asking whether or not you were straddling his stomach area.
I think I might have been.
Okay? You say you think you might have been, which means really nothing because you're not admitting to anything. Isn't it true that you were straddling his midsection?
Objection, ask and answer. It's been
Sustained.
the third time.
Sustained.
Ma'am, and during that time that you were on top of him, there was some kissing that was going on, right?
No, we were sleeping.
But as soon as you woke up, you kissed him, right?
Not as soon as I woke up.
Some point thereafter, you kissed him, right?
Before I left, yes.
So you're saying that there was no romantic kissing that went on, is what you're telling me, right?
That's not what I'm saying.
So there was romantic kissing that went on.
Yes.
When did this romantic kissing take place?
I think it started first in the afternoon and then in the evening, or I guess it would be early morning on the 5th or the 6th. But
And
Before
he
I
also
left.
placed his hands between your legs, right? Some point.
not that I recall.
But that means that you were here when he testified, right?
Yes.
So it could be that he did place his hands between your legs, right?
No, could be that he was full of crap. He didn't go there.
So you are saying that Mr. Burns is full of crap.
When he said he got near my vaginal area, absolutely.
So, and you're the same person that's telling us that he's full of crap that has lied to him, right?
Yes.
That has lied to Leslie Jodie, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That has lied to Detective Flores on 2 occasions, right?
Yes.
And to continue this litany of lies, it isn't restricted to Utah. You also lied to people in Arizona, didn't you?
Yes. Everyone.
Right. And yet you're telling us somebody else is full of crap, right?
When it comes to that, yes.
So the answer is yes.
I said yes.
And so after this happened, you went back to Wairika, correct? Drove back.
Yes.
And you drove back to Wairika and you didn't tell anybody anything that had happened, right?
You mean at Travis's house?
Yes, that's right.
That's correct.
One of the things that ended up happening, though, is that you then received a call on June 10th of 2008 in the early morning hours, right?
Yes.
And you received that call from an individual by the name of Daniel Freeman, didn't you?
Yes,
He's the same individual that testified here today, not today, but at some point during these proceedings, right?
yes,
And he was telling you about Mr. Alexander, right?
yes.
And you lied to him, right?
I don't know, I guess.
Well, no, we don't want you to guess, man. You did lie to him, didn't you?
I'm trying to recall our conversation.
Well, did you tell him I'm the person who killed him? You didn't do that, did you?
No, I didn't.
You pretended you didn't know anything about it, right?
I don't remember. He just told me.
I know what he just told you. I want to know whether or not you told him that you knew that something had happened to Mr. Alexander on June 4th of 2008. Did you tell him that?
No.
You omitted that, right?
Yes.
Even though he was calling you to talk to you about Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes.
The conversation allowed for that sort of response from you, right?
Yes.
But you didn't do it. Instead, you kept it to yourself, right?
Yes.
He was upset when he called you, right?
Objection, cause for speculation.
Sustained.
Heard his voice, right?
Yes.
And you could tell from his voice whether or not he was upset. You've been around him before, hadn't you?
Yes.
You'd been around him many times going to his house for Sunday dinner, right?
Yes.
And you've also been around him when he'd been around with his family, right?
Yes.
With his sister Desiree, right?
Yes.
Had gone up to Sedona with you, right?
Yes.
Had gone up to the Grand Canyon with you, right?
Yes.
Had gone up to the Havasupai Falls, right?
Yes.
You had significant contact with him, right?
Yes.
And in fact, at some point, you even thought that he liked you, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you wrote that in your journal, right?
Yes.
So you could tell from his tone of voice that he was upset.
I've never heard him upset in my life, actually.
Okay, so that tone of voice that he displayed to you was foreign to you.
It was gentle, the way he was talking.
All right, so it was a gentle tone of voice. And in this gentle tone of voice, you never told him that you were responsible for the killing of Mr. Alexander, were you?
No, I did not.
You could have, though, right?
Yes.
He was a pretty close friend, right?
Yes.
And instead, what you chose to do is you chose to perpetuate the lie, right?
Yes.
You then started to call a religious person, didn't you?
Yes.
You called somebody by the name of Bishop Layton, right?
Yes.
And you called him and you know, asked him whether or not Mr. Alexander was dead, right?
I didn't think I asked him that.
Well, isn't that the topic of the conversation, Mr. Alexander's death?
Yes.
And during this time, you're calling as the grieving ex-girlfriend, right? Somebody who cares.
I was calling as a friend.
Okay, if you're calling as a friend, why are you calling if you already know what happened to Mr. Alexander other than to lie about it?
There were many things I didn't know.
Oh, so you just want...
As soon as she got back from that trip, that 5-day trip, where she obviously killed Travis, went to see her new boyfriend, and then came back to her grandparents' place, she put up a lot of social media content, presenting herself as, oh my God, I can't believe my great friend is dead. She put a lot of effort into portraying herself as, another victim of the primary victim.
wanted to get information about the death so you could use it later to lie about it? Is that what it is?
Objection, argument.
I just called because I wanted to know what he knew.
And the reason you wanted to know what he knew was so that you could see whether or not anybody was on to you, right?
Yes, partially.
And it wasn't like you cared about Mr. Alexander. It was you just wanted to see what it was that you needed to do to make sure that you weren't charged with a crime, right?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Ma'am, you wanted to see what he knew is what you told us, right?
Yes.
What purpose would there be for that information, knowing what he knows about it, other than to benefit you?
The fact that there was a big memory block was bothering me.
I'm not asking you if a memory block was bothering you.
You asked
Am
the
I?
reason, what other reason?
Am I asking you if a memory block was bothering you?
Objection, Your Honor, to ask an answer. She answered the question he asked.
Am I asking you if a memory block was bothering you?
No.
I was asking you about the information that you were trying to get and what you were going to do with it, right?
No, that's not what you were asking me.
Man, isn't it true that I asked you the purpose for calling Bishop Layton, right?
No.
I asked you that. Why did you call Bishop Layton? Didn't I ask you that?
Prior, yes.
Well, this is part of the same conversation, isn't it?
Yes.
And you do agree that you called Bishop Layton, right?
Yes.
In the middle of the night, right?
Yes.
3 a.m., I think, right?
Yeah, it was late.
And you called Bishop Layton and you spoke to him because you wanted to get information about what he knew about the investigation, right?
That was part of it.
Yes, that part. Let's talk about that part. The part that you wanted to know about the investigation, that was going to help you should something come of this, right?
Objection, again.
That wasn't my thought, really.
That wasn't your thought, then why do you even want to know about it?
I couldn't remember much or anything from that day.
Well, you remembered that you had been there, didn't you?
Yes.
You remembered that there had been this confrontation, right?
I do remember that.
Yes, and you remember that you didn't call 911, right?
Yes.
So why is it that you even need to know about the investigation since you have firsthand knowledge? Why are you asking for somebody who has secondhand knowledge?
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterized. She didn't have first-hand knowledge. She had no memory.
You were there. You're the person who killed her, right? You've admitted that in court, right?
Yes.
That means you were there, right?
Yes.
If you were there and you knew you were there, you did know you were there, though, didn't you?
Yes.
If you knew that you were there and that he was dead, then why are you calling for information? Is it to rub it in?
Objection, argumentative.
Why are you calling
Your
for?
Honor.
Pardon?
May continue.
After Bishop Layton, who did you call?
I think I called Gus Searcy at one point.
Didn't you also call Leslie Udy?
Yes.
And you called to tell her about this, right?
Yes.
And this was after you had received confirmation that he was dead, right?
I believe it was, yes.
You never told her again during this conversation about the fact that you had been there on June 4th of 2008, correct?
That's correct.
Now, in addition to making statements to those people, you went out of your way to contact Mr. Alexander's family, didn't you?
Again, argumentative, out of his way.
I made contact, yes.
Well, do you know who Mumums is?
Yes.
What is Mumum's name?
Norma Sarby.
And Norma Sarby is Mr. Alexander's grandmother, right?
That's right.
And in fact, that's the person who raised Mr. Alexander, correct?
I believe so.
Well, when you say you believe so, it sounds like you don't know. You did have a relationship with Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes.
And on direct examination, you told us about a time that you went over to his grandmother's house, right?
Yes.
And you and Mr. Alexander talked about his upbringing in the Rubidoux area of Southern California, right?
Briefly.
Pardon? Briefly means you did talk about it, right?
Yes.
And so one of the things that you did was that you actually sent Miss Sarvey irises, right?
Yes.
And you sent her 20 of them, right?
Yes.
And in addition to that, you attached a note, right?
Yes,
And then you indicated that she was in your prayers, right?
yes.
You did this, ma'am. That's a lie, right? When you say that you felt sympathy for her, isn't it?
No, that wasn't a lie.
Oh, so you felt badly for her?
Yes,
You felt badly for her. Is this just sort of a way for you to assuage your guilt? Is that what it is?
that wasn't my thought.
Pardon?
That wasn't my thought.
Well, you say that wasn't your thought, but if you're the person that has done this, she actually received them on June 13th of 2008, didn't you?
I don't know.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Ma'am, didn't you write in your journal that she received them on June 13th of 2008?
Yes,
So you weren't speculating about that, were you?
I was going off my email confirmation.
Right. So she received these, and you included this message telling her that you were sorry for what had happened, right?
Yes,
That was for your benefit, wasn't it?
no,
Well, it wasn't for your benefit?
no,
Even though you had done it, you still were sending this out, right?
sending what?
Part-
The flowers?
The irises, the
Yes.
flowers. That's what we're talking about. And you knew she was an older woman, didn't you?
Yes,
And you knew that she was very tight with Mr. Alexander, right?
yes,
And so you, as her killer, then, are sending these items to her.
Objection, Your Honors. Related to killing her?
Sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the noon recess at this time. Please be back in the jury room by 1:25. Remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. You are excused.
All right, folks, that's the end of what I'm going to play tonight. I'll be back on hopefully tomorrow or the next day and play some more of this trial. There's definitely still a lot to go through. But it's all very interesting just to see the way that the dynamics change between Juan and Jodie, and then with Alice Lafayette when she comes on to the stand is very interesting as well. But that's all for now. So thanks for everyone that came in, and I shall see you all when I'm next on. All right. Take care, guys.